Hello, welcome to Lady Lovestead Reads. My name is Jessica. Let's talk about the best things from 2025. Of course, this is all my perspective and things that I experienced in the year 2025, and I'm going to focus primarily on books, of course. But I also want to chat about just personal moments that I had in 2025 that kind of highlighted the year, as well as music that I loved and TV shows. I didn't really watch any movies except for Christmas movies. So in terms of watching, all I can really talk about is TV. All right, so let me start with just like an overview of things I experienced in my own life in 2025 that you have been a part of or been here to witness. So I started 2025 recovering from gallbladder surgery. And recovery went well, and I'm feeling much better, not having any of the gut issues that I had in 2024, which is wonderful. I turned 40 years old in February, which I'm still wrapping my head around, but I'm also like so grateful because a lot of people don't make it to 40. So I'm very, very thankful I turned 40. I stayed employed. Whew. You know, the way things are going in the US, staying employed for a full year with the same employer is a blessing, and I'm so thankful for that. Sadly, in August, my cat Cherry passed away. She was 16, and it's gonna sound weird to say this, but I have a lot of peace about the way her story ended. I feel like we did things right with Cherry, or I did things right with Cherry. I was able to keep her really comfortable all the way to the end of her life. I was able to be there for her in her final moments and hold her as she passed. The night before she passed, we stayed up all night long snuggling and just drinking each other in and loving on each other. And honestly, if you're gonna have a pet pass, which they do, I feel like that's what you want, right? That's how you want it to end. So while I miss her terribly, and I'd much rather her still be here and healthy, not here and suffering, but here and healthy, I'd trade that in a heartbeat to have her back. But I feel like if it had to happen, I have a lot of peace over how it happened. I met Penelope Douglas in August, and it was a really fun event. It was like a signing. So there was like a line way out the door, and it took 2 hours in line to finally get to her and get her to sign my books. But she was lovely in person, and I got a really neat little grab bag from the event and everything. And she remains one of, if not my favorite romance author. So it was so cool to be able to meet her. I went to a horse clinic put on by Clinton Anderson. If you're in the horse world, you know who he is. He's controversial. There are things I like about his methods, and there are things I really don't like about his methods. But I was able to go to his very last in-person clinic because he's retiring from teaching clinics and just doing training now. And it was really cool. It was really inspiring. It was really interesting. It gave me a lot to think about. I learned a lot. And it was also kind of reassuring that I'm doing a lot of right things with my own horse. This was the first ever like show or horse event that I've been to as an equestrian. I've been to shows before I actually had my own horse, but like this was my first time going to an event like this as someone who has a horse and can apply what they were talking about. And it was a really cool experience. I was making an effort this year to get out and talk to people and meet new people, so I joined a local book club that I attended, and I'm proud of myself for that. I also went to a weekly Bible study at my church and met some people there, and I'm proud of myself for that. And then probably the last highlight of 2025 was adopting Thunder, my newest little baby kitty, and with him, my family feels complete again. Let's talk about music. I am getting really into music again, which is fun. And there were 4 albums that dropped this year that I really enjoyed. Yunblud's new album, Idols, was my top album of the year, actually, when you looked at your Spotify Wrapped or whatever. I think he is just such an interesting talent, one to watch. And if you like rock, like classic 90s rock, think in the style of Aerosmith, you would probably like his music. Taylor Swift's new album, I am uncomfortable with it in a lot of ways. So I don't like saying this, but I loved the album. Like, I loved the songs. I know for a lot of people it was a total miss, but for me, I really enjoyed it. At first listen, I was like, yes, this is awesome. I really like it. Second listen, third listen, I got a little bit uncomfortable with some of the things going on in the lyrics. So I say this very uncomfortably, but I loved Life of a Showgirl. Florence and the Machine's new album was awesome. It's very Florence and the Machine. And then Hayley Williams dropped her first solo piece, and she kind of like spoon-fed us the songs, but it was really good. It was really fun, and I'm starting to learn more about like her lore and everything, because one of my buddies really loves Hayley Williams, so she's like sending me stuff about her, so that's been really fun. So I'd say those are my top 4 albums of the year that I listened to. For TV, I didn't watch a ton of stuff this year, guys, so I didn't even watch one movie aside from a Christmas movie, and otherwise I was just rewatching classics while I did chores or whatever. And so there was really only just a handful of things that I watched, and it was mainly TV. I tend to prefer TV over movies anyway, because you can get more invested in the story and the characters. So the second season of Wednesday came out, which I loved. The Diddy documentary, produced by 50 Cent, I thought was fantastic, well done, and I really liked how it was like a look at the history of 90s hip hop and rap. And then of course Stranger Things ended, and I have mixed feelings about the final season, but ultimately found it really entertaining. And a show that came onto Netflix from the 90s that I've been rewatching as an adult and I haven't watched since I was actually a kid in the 90s is Home Improvement, and I'm having a lot of fun revisiting that show. Okay, it's time for books, which is why you're probably here. I have 2 honorable mentions that I'll talk about, and then I have my top 5 books of 2025. The first honorable mention is This Moth Saw Brightness by A.A. Vacharat. This is a young adult sci-fi. It's about a group of teenagers that gets recruited for a government study, and when they talk to each other, they discover that they all have something in common, and it's that they're all neurodivergent in some way, whether it's autism or ADHD or something else. This book really gets into some important ideas around research, specifically government-funded research in the United States and the history of it. It asks questions about who do we do research on and why, what bodies do we think are expendable in the name of science, and a lot of ethical questions around research. This gets pretty complex for a YA, but I really appreciate that Vacharat did not hold back on the complexity of it, and she assumed that her YA audience could handle it. The second honorable mention is Tide by Carianne. This is a dark romance, I would say, and it's about a woman who is taken captive as a child. Like, she's kidnapped and held captive in this guy's basement for most of her childhood. And then the male main character is injured in a fire when he's a teenager, so his face is really disfigured and he's got a bunch of trauma. So they essentially both have a lot of trauma, a lot of baggage that they're working through. And the way that they meet is that he actually discovers where she's hidden by this man and then rescues her. And she goes into a rehabilitation facility, because when you go through something like that, you just can't jump right back into society. Like, she's got to be rehabilitated. And so she's there for a few years, but she keeps thinking about him because he rescued her. So she wants to find him and thank him. She does, and things go from there. This is a book about just really cautious love. Like, they're so careful with each other. They understand each other's trauma, They are so gentle with each other emotionally, and I thought it was so well done. I love a romance that really gets into the psychology of the characters and how each individual character's interaction with the other works together to create the relationship, you know? I don't know if that makes any sense, but I feel like Carianne Cole did a really good job of the psychology of these characters. All right, and now we're on to my top 5 of the year. Coming in at number 5 is Darkly by Marisha Pessl. This is a young adult thriller horror. It's about this game designer that recruits teenagers to serve as an intern as part of this game design. But the game designer is this super underground sort of cult following game designer, and some of her games have actually been outlawed because they're dangerous and people have gotten hurt playing them. So these kids get recruited to be a part of this internship, and when they get there, they end up on this like English island that's remote and isolated from everything, and this internship is not what it seems. This was such a fun ride. I love Marisha Pessl and her brain and the dark places that she goes. Number 4, Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is also a young adult horror, and it's about 2 boys who go to a boarding school, and one of them writes scary stories and the other draws spooky drawings. And it might be that those drawings are coming to life in the forest outside the school. That could be something that's happening. This has a lot of really good nature-based horror, and it also has really good anxiety, asexuality, and panic disorder representation. Number 3, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. This is his memoir, and it's about his time acting, but more so about his struggle with addiction, his lifelong struggle with addiction. He's so honest, and he gives really good detail about what actually happens in his brain and body as he struggles with addiction, as he has these cravings, as he goes into recovery. And he's so detailed with that. And he explains it in such a way that makes addiction easy to understand. If I was teaching a course on addiction, I would make this required reading, because he explains his experience with addiction in a way that I've never heard anyone else articulate quite so eloquently. He's also just a really good writer, and you know, it's kind of heartbreaking knowing how his story ends, but this was an excellent memoir that I would recommend. Number 2, Margo's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. This is an adult literary fiction, and it's about Margo, who has a relationship with her community college professor and ends up pregnant, and he wants nothing to do with her and the child after that. So she lives in California, where the cost of living is like inhumanely high, and she has to do what she has to do to make money and provide for her child. What I loved most about this book is the character work, particularly the characters of Margo and her father, who moves in with her to help her out. Margo's dad is a retired WWE wrestler, and they had been estranged, but then they are able to repair things so that he can come help her out and help with his grandkid, help with finances. And it's a mutually beneficial relationship, because he's also run into some struggles himself with getting divorced and things like that. But seeing their relationship and the dynamics between them and their character development, I just loved it. It was so heartwarming. And you wouldn't think with these topics that are in this book that it would be heartwarming, but it really is. All right, my best book of the year is Whalefall by Daniel Kraus. This is about a young man who is a scuba diver. His father passes away, and his father's remains are somewhere in the ocean. So he wants to do a dive to find his dad's remains. When he does the dive, he gets swallowed by a whale. And it's so gross. It's so gross. And then as we're like reading about him being inside this whale and trying to survive and figure things out, we also get flashbacks to time with his family as he's processing grief and the loss of his father. And it's a complicated grief that he has, because his relationship with his father was quite complicated. And I read this book in one sitting and was a sobbing mess on my floor by the end of it. I do think in part because I also am experiencing complicated grief after losing my own father, so it hit at a really personal level, but it was also just such a good book. And if you like sci-fi, if you like books about grief, If you like horror, definitely read this. That was my 2025 in a nutshell. So in the comments below, let me know what were some of your personal highlights or favorite things that happened in your life in 2025. Any favorite books, TV shows, music, anything that you want to share about your year. If you just want to leave me an emoji to let me know that you are here, go ahead and leave me, we've got lots of options that we could pick from for an emoji. Leave me a hammer emoji for home improvement. And until next time, make sure that you continue to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!